Hello, my name is Sandy Adamitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey writers, it's Sandy. Boy, do we have a great show for you today. Our guests are John Wirth and Gail Matthius, two people who met in high school, reconnected in college, fell in love, and moved to Hollywood in the early 80s to pursue their dreams. Gail became a cast member on Saturday Night Live in 1981 and is known for her voice acting work in animated shows like Bobby's World, Tiny Toon Adventures, and The Tick. John Wirth is a television showrunner, producer, and writer, and his credits include Hell on Wheels, Woo Assassins, Terminator, the SARAH Connor Chronicles, NASH Bridges, way too many to even mention. In part one, Gail and John discuss the early days and their willingness to work hard to succeed. In part two, we'll focus on the difference between when Gail and John were struggling versus today in 2023 when, unfortunately, actors and writers are out on strike for a decent wage and protection from artificial intelligence. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Sandy Adamitis.
Hi, I'm Terry Sampson.
Terry, It is a big day for us at the Writers Hangout.
Yes, it is.
We are in beautiful downtown Pacific Palisades on our very first on-location podcast.
Yep, I'm never leaving.
We decided to up the stakes and also have our very first in-studio guests.
That was a good idea since we came all the way to Pacific Palisades.
Yes.
Good thinkers.
I'd like to introduce John Wirth and Gail Matthius.
Yay.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout podcast. John and Gail, we brought you here today.
Well, we live here.
We brought ourselves here 30 years ago.
It was an easy bring.
We want to talk about what it was like when you first arrived in Hollywood versus now actors and writers are on strike. How did you two meet? Gail?
We met in high school in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, at Washington Senior High. It was our senior year, and I saw this guy.
Wait, was I there?
Yes, Twas you. I was watching this guy. I guess it must have been winter. So it was like, December.
December is not a month. I think you mean D. It was back in December.
Already really hard.
I think this is the part where Sandy and Terry are going, don't worry, we'll edit this out.
I'm crying.
They'll never hear a word about the sales.
Okay, so I see this guy. He's walking up the steps. I go, who's that guy that would dare wear those?
We can edit this out, people.
We wear things with buckles. We wear overshoes.
Right.
We do not wear mucklucks. I said, What is the deal with that guy? I want to know who that is.
So you saw him going up the stairs.
Yeah.
So you saw the back of him first and then looked at the shoes.
Yeah.
That's the best part of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I had somebody introduce us, and then we ended up in the same note hand class. January of 1971.
Mrs. White.
Mrs. White.
Note hand.
It was like poor man's shorthand.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Anyone who was born in December was not able to do shorthand. You had to only do note hand.
Being a Matthias, Wirth was in back, and I had hair down to my butt. I had really, really long, gorgeous, beautiful hair. And then go ahead, you tell me.
Well, but I'm going to tell you why this is a significant story about seeing me from the back. So I'm on the picket line, and I'm walking, like a few weeks ago. I see a bunch of people I haven't seen in a while, and this little clump of people are standing there talking. And I walk up, and this guy says, "Oh, John, I haven't seen you in forever, blah, blah, blah," and introduced me to some people. And then he says, when I was on Judging Amy, your ass was a big topic of conversation in that writer's room.
This is how we're starting the podcast.
What?
And I said, that's what I said. What? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, people were talking about your ass all the time. I said, no, maybe they were talking about what an ass I am. And he goes, no, I think it was your ass they were talking about. And so now people are starting to pull up around this little group of people. And that was...
Side story. I once mentioned you to a friend who was an executive at Fox at the time. And he went, oh, John Wirth with the good legs.
Wow.
So...
It's so sad that this is just audio.
Was it Note Hand that you first noticed Gail with the long hair sitting in front of you?
Yeah, I'm not from South Dakota. I
am a proud South Dakota.
Gail is born and raised in South Dakota. I was shipped off to South Dakota my senior year of high school, where I did my time. I was a little lost, little way. And so I saw this girl.
Yes. And then what happened?
She said, you should really meet my friend Gail. That was Barb Schock. Barb Schock is
childhood friend who went on to win an Academy Award for My Mother Dreams the Hell's Angels in New York short.
I haven't talked to her for
She's my childhood friend. We used to put shows on in the backyard.
Get out of
town. Come on now.
And I'd already seen Gail because I saw the hair.
Yeah.
And I saw even though she was trying to hide it, I was aware of the interest in the mucklucks.
How did the both of you get to Los Angeles?
Yeah. So we went to
college
the same college
together.
In Minnesota.
More or less.
Gustavus
Adolphus College in St. Peter, Minnesota.
Learn how to pronounce it because it is the Harvard of the Midwest.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. We go to all the reunions because we graduated from the same high school class and we graduated from the same college class.
Wow.
Were you supposed to return back to Diamond Bar or did you stay because of Gail?
When I was 16, I ran away from home. My family was in Diamond Bar, California, which is about 60 miles east of where we're sitting now. So my parents moved to South Dakota when I was 16 and they dragged me with them. And I was at war with my father. I left. My mother said, you got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I left and I came back to Diamond Bar and was knocking around. And a friend of mine's mother said, hey, didn't your family move a while ago? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, I've seen you around a lot. And I said, yeah. And she goes, do you have any shoes? I said, yes, I do. But we don't wear shoes because this is, 1968 and we don't do that. We're hippie dudes. And she goes, well, where do you live? And I said, and she said, you live here now. So she took me in and I lived with them for my junior year of high school. I didn't go to school very much anyway, but I lived there. And then my mother died suddenly. And
in Sioux Falls.
She was in Sioux Falls. She died suddenly. Right. She was standing between my father and me. And then I got in some other trouble.
Standing in a good way or a bad way?
A good protecting me.
The protecting way,
him.
Okay.
And then I got in some trouble and I ended up sort of being remanded to my father's custody.
It involved marijuana.
And I was shipped off, put on an airplane, sent back there, and I lived with him for my senior year of high school. And he, halfway through my senior year, he married a woman that had 5 children. And so suddenly we were a big family.
Step family.
Yeah. I lived in the basement of his house in the
laundry room.
In the laundry room. There was a bed on the floor in there. I mean, like a mattress on the floor, and that's where I lived.
Yeah.
And then when I got, it's such a sad story.
You wrote a scene that I've always remembered, and it plays in my head every once in a while. It was on NASH Bridges, and it was a scene, one of the characters, I don't remember which character's father was dying. And this character had a acrimonious relationship with the father. And the character went to the hospital to say goodbye to his father. And he gets back to the precinct and they say, what was it like? And you wrote, he looked really small.
Oh.
I love that line.
That's a nice line.
It's such a perfect line because you really get that. I always took it as he's not the big bad man that I thought. He's small. So I thought it encapsulated beautifully.
It
is a nice line. I have no memory of that scene or of writing that.
Yeah.
I probably wrote it.
One of us did here, I'm pretty sure.
Terry, did you write that?
I may have done it.
Yeah, so anyway, that's how I ended up there.
Yeah.
And then I got drafted also because the Vietnam War was going on.
Was that a high number or a low number? I forget what that
It was
meant.
a low number.
A low number meant you were going, right? And for the writers out there that don't understand, there was literally a lottery where they picked...
They would put numbers
like
on a...
bingo.
They'd put dates on a ping pong ball, and then they'd put the ping pong balls in this big bin that was turning, and then they usually had some celebrity dude come in and pick...
Get out of town, a celebrity.
Ping pong balls out of the rolling drum, and then randomly, and then whatever your number was randomly, and then they put it on TV.
Wow, I didn't...
Yeah.
Imagine families sitting around the TV as ping pong balls popped up, whether your son is going off to Vietnam. It infuriates me.
What we
it
did
really does.
was we all went to buy, each of us bought a 12-pack, all my buddies, and it was drink 12 beers in celebration because you're not going to Vietnam, or drink 12 beers instead of killing yourself.
Right.
And
you were on the way out the door to Canada.
And then the war ended. And when I
Thank
say
goodness.
ended, I mean they stopped taking people, and I didn't have to go.
Good. I'm glad.
And so
And you
then,
didn't have to go to Canada.
yeah,
Viewers, though, it's a lovely place if you're listening to this podcast.
By all means.
Yes.
I've lived in a couple places in Canada. I like it a lot. I had fallen between the cracks of my senior year of high school when people are looking at colleges and so forth. So when I graduated from this high school...
Was that before or after I was up for homecoming?
Wow.
After. Go ahead.
That's like, skip on down. It's not a podcast about you. It's a podcast about us being in Hollywood. We're still in South Dakota. We have to stretch this out. We can't
and I
start
didn't even
100
have a
miles an hour.
question about South Dakota.
I know.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, I ended up going to South Dakota State University for a year because the counselor called me into his office. He said, "Who are you? Where'd you come from? Where are you going to college? Or you're going to Vietnam?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said,
Oh, well, you skipped the best part. He said, she said, "You're smart. What are you doing about college?"
"Yeah, I
Mr.
think it was more
Modest
like,
Wirth.
you're smart. You shouldn't be going to Vietnam." I was like, "Oh, only dumb kids go and get killed."
Oh,
Okay.
great. Okay.
Anyway, so I went to this college, which was the only place he had any connections to get me in, to try to get a college deferment, which had been available earlier, but they stopped them. So anyway, then we kind of hooked up. I was hitchhiking to see a buddy of mine at another college in Minnesota, and
He never made it.
and I went through her town where her college was, and I was like, "Oh, Gail Matthius is in college here." And no cell phones, no computers back then, dark ages. And
Shows
I
up.
went to a bar. I didn't show up. I went to a bar, and I called you from a bar. "How's it going? I just had a couple." And so Gail says,
Maybe you'd like to come up and visit with me for a while.
My hair length is long.
So I went up there, and I never left that weekend. And then I started hitchhiking over there every weekend. And then a couple of weekends, she hitchhiked to see me.
He used to hitchhike to see
It was
him.
about 400 miles.
With a buddy, girlfriend.
Wow.
So then I transferred to where she went to college. Then we moved to Minneapolis after college. We lived in Minneapolis. I went to grad school.
Yeah, I started theater and my stand-up act up in Minneapolis at Mickey Finn's with everybody from Louis Anderson to...
There's a dump in North Minneapolis,
They started doing
and
stand-up.
the owner was like, "Well, let's put some stand-up in here." So Gail and
That is
Scott
so
Novotny
cool.
and Louis Anderson and Jeff Turbino and a bunch of people like that.
Alex Cole.
Alex Cole were all doing stand-up together in there. And I was in graduate school, and then I was teaching school. So I got to be 25, and I was like, okay, I'm teaching school. I have a master's degree. I want to be a writer. If I don't try to do it now, when am I going to do it? So I wrote a script with a buddy, and we were going to move to California and be movie writers. So we wrote an Animal House movie. And he had gotten married, I think, while we were writing the movie. After he got married, his wife said, "You're not going." So I came by myself and then started hustling around, trying to be in the movie business. And that was in 78. And Gail came out in
79.
79, and then a year later moved to New York to be on Saturday Night Live. But she'll tell you that story.
So you guys are in Los Angeles in 79.
Correct, yes.
What was your impression of Los Angeles and the business?
Well, speaking for myself, I knew nothing about anything. And there was this thing, become a writer's assistant and then move from writer's assistant to staff writer to, so on.
Right.
That didn't exist because there really weren't writers' rooms as we know them today back then. So you could, for instance, we lived in a 3-bedroom duplex in the Pico Robertson area.
I lived in the Pico Robertson area.
Okay.
I drove through that area myself. I just drove through.
What street did you live
We
on?
lived on Crest.
I love that area. What was your first apartment?
$575.
$575 a month.
For what?
3-bedroom, 2-bath.
It was 1,500 square feet.
Wow.
And we had 2 roommates.
We had 2 roommates.
One was a woman I had met because I did a junior year abroad in Mexico, and I had met her there, and she kept saying, if you ever come to LA, and so I came to LA, and I said, I'm in LA. She said, well,
We need a roommate.
our roommate just moved in with her boyfriend.
And then the other woman was
She was a telephone lineman.
So you weren't there yet, Gail. This is just
Correct.
John's solo.
Yeah. So then Gail decided to move out, and then she moved into my little room with me, and then we were like, you other women have to move out.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't go with you is because I got that Alice
that's right.
Chalmers job.
Yeah.
And elaborate on that.
Need any help?
The tractor companies in the Midwest would, in the dead of winter, hire actresses, singers to do shows in the garage pits of the various tractor company sales, like the sales places.
Really?
So I did shows in December and January of 78 and 79.
What did you make, like $1,500 or something?
Yeah, I mean, it was just
And we were going,
big
oh my
money.
God,
I said, oh my
we've
God, I
never
got to
seen
stay here and do this job.
$1,500.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
all the glamour that went with it.
All the
obviously.
glamour, the orange Kiana, because Alice Chalmers was all about orange, big orange line. This is a 70/50. You gotta buy it now. If you don't do it, I'm gonna find a way to slip a cow. I don't know.
Wait, what? Hold on now.
Yeah, I just
Hold
made
on.
that up.
I know you don't. I'm sure that wasn't your script.
No, it wasn't.
It
But
just-
and I also sat. I sat on farmers' laps. Isn't that awful?
But tell the story. Tell that one story. Oh man,
said-
now I'm getting mad. But tell that one. Tell the story. Tell that one I
and
love
they
so
were
much.
wearing overalls.
Yeah.
Well, that's no surprise, really.
But I would come in with my orange Kiana dress into those awful, greasy garage pits with all the sand on
Show business, baby.
on the oil and stuff, soaking up the oil.
Oh,
and
God.
I ate so many ham sandwiches because they all wanted me to eat.
Hold on now. How much
They
weight
want
did
me to
you?
eat.
How much weight did you gain on that job?
I got heavy.
You're pretty porky.
I came back the pork queen. And I would walk in with the orange dress.
I thought
and
you were wearing someone
Stop
else's
it!
cheeks when I
Stop
saw
it!
you.
I walked in with
Whose
the
cheeks are
orange
those?
dress, and they would see me, and I was looking around for the bathroom. Nice in those places. And farmers would come up, sidling up, and, hey, need any help? And no, I'm good. Yeah, no. And I would get in the car with regional managers. Total strangers would come to my apartment in Minneapolis and pick me up and drive me to Wisconsin, 3-4 hours to do these shows. Wow. I did 3 or 4 a week, then come back to Minneapolis and be exhausted. And then on Monday morning, I'd get up and go out to Yankton, South Dakota, or Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And
I could imagine you could not get to the plane fast enough to get to LA.
yeah, to get to LA because I had that money then. I had my savings account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gail supported me for a long time in those days.
But then after my Alice Chalmers thing, then I would run to do my stand-up act on the weekends when I was home.
She came out here,
79.
started doing the comedy clubs out here,
Yeah,
and there
right
were,
away.
it was the Comedy Store and
Improv.
and there were a bunch of
There was
places.
the Scientology Center.
They had a show there?
They had the Celebrity Center or one of those places. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they had theater. And they were very
was-
positive.
There were a bunch
Oh,
of places
just all
in
these
the
places. There
valley.
was Osco's on La Cienega, which is where the Beverly Center is now. And all these little obscure clubs, I would do 3 and 4 sets a night, my stand-up act.
That actually sounds amazing to me.
Yeah,
It
made
really
sense.
does.
It
To
made
just be young and
Yeah.
so excited, and you're just in Los
did-
Angeles hitting the clubs.
My memory of those days was Gail would go to bed.
I come home from working at TRW.
Yeah, because we had straight jobs. We had temporary jobs. I was a typist. One of my first screenplays was called The Typist, which was about an experience I had working in Century City. We would do the straight jobs, and then we would try to, work at night. This is why I stopped doing substances and, all this stuff, because I needed the time to write. If I had 8 hours of recovery on a Saturday, then I lost an entire day of when I could be writing, which turned out to be good.
So I would come home from working at
long-term
TRW, have to take a nap.
Go to bed and then get up at midnight, get in the car, and run around to do
3 or
these
4 sets at different places.
At these different clubs.
Did you write your own stuff back then?
Yes.
And you had more than one set to go because you were working, or did you have a set that was the killer and you use that?
It was my set, but I did characters. I started up as a very young little girl reading a Dick and Jane book. And if you've ever read a Dick and Jane book with adult eyes...
Big Dick. Yes, Spot. Run, Spot. Run.
And then at the end of that little bit, I go, and everybody's laughing because I'm reading literally a Dick and Jane book.
I would love to talk about performing at the legendary Comedy Store. Can you tell us about that time? What was it like?
I can tell you about it. Like I said, I would get up late, or I'd get up after a nap and then go do a set. I mean, in the back hall, getting ready to go on, was Jay Leno and Letterman and
Robin.
Sam Kinison.
Get out of town.
Louis.
was here.
Paul Mooney.
From Minneapolis by then.
Paul Mooney.
But Mitzi Shore, who owned the club at the time, was very protective of the women, and she wanted to nurture us and have us bring our acts along rather than just throwing us on the original room stage or the main room, which was the big room where actually I did my sketch comedy stuff with my group, Tommy Tofu. So what it was like, it just seemed normal. I mean, I'd been doing these characters, and I was fine-tuning and singing throughout the...
Were the guys welcoming? Did they kind of...
They thought, we're just shuttled off into the belly room. Upstairs in the belly room, in the kind of the belly of the building.
I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Do you think Mitzi was right in making that decision of separating the women? I know it came from a place of being protective.
Yeah.
You didn't need to be protected from Paul Mooney.
No, it wasn't from them, but it was for us to really fine-tune our acts and be able to then be allowed or whatever put in front of everybody in the original room and the main room. So the audience wouldn't eat us up.
Okay, so
I actually appreciated it.
Okay, great. So I should really look at the time.
Yeah. And I think she was really trying to nurture and be protective of us. Not protect us from the other comedians, but protect us from being brutalized by the audience and really be able to work out our acts before we put it in the real public. Because for the most part, up in the belly room, it would be an invited audience. It would be our friends and supportive people.
Well, however,
that makes sense.
That's where you got seen by the SNL people.
That's right.
And that is how you were cast.
Yes.
Did you know they were in the audience? Oh, who came?
It was the casting. I see that guy. I can't remember his name. But, yeah, somebody heard about me. I was in the process. All of a sudden, I was being grabbed.
Time out. They weren't just in the audience and happened to see you. They were coming to see you?
They came to see me.
That is huge. I mean, you got on the show. That's the biggest ticket. But that is huge to have someone from Saturday Night Live come see you.
And I'll tell you who I can thank for that, and that is Lotus Weinstock. May she rest in peace.
She was like a den mother of all the younger
the most
comedians.
Lovely, beautiful person. Had a very funny, fabulous act. Very kind of ethereal of act. But anyway, so she recommended me to these Saturday Night Live people. And it was because of her that they came to see me in both my stand-up act, and then they came to see me in the main room doing my sketch comedy stuff with Tommy Tofu and my 3 other friends.
They came to see you in 2 different rooms.
Yeah, and then
again, that's even huge.
Yeah, and then they brought me in to a room somewhere and I did my act in front of them. Maybe that was first. I don't know. Then I had another thing out in the valley. Who knows the name of that place? And that was perhaps the most stressful. I remember that was the first time I experienced back spasms because I felt extraordinary stress for that because I knew I was getting closer and closer and closer. And then I got the call. They said, we want to fly you to New York to audition. Wow. And I had an 8-hour audition.
Oh, come on.
You fly with?
Pee-wee. Paul.
Oh, was that
Paul
right?
Rubin.
And
who we unfortunately just lost.
Yes. And I read something that he was so devastated when he didn't get chosen for Saturday Night Live. And he thought his career was over because he didn't get chosen. But we know otherwise. I flew with my agent at the time, and then the 8-hour audition, and mixing.
Is that continuously? Like you were on stage for 8 straight hours?
Well, mixing and matching.
Oh,
they were mixing.
They
I
kept
get it.
bringing new people in for you to play off of.
Yes.
By the way, her agent was Chris
That's
Albrecht.
not easy.
Chris Albrecht, get out of town.
Yeah.
HBO, Chris Albrecht.
Yes. He was an
He was your agent?
He was an ICM agent then.
Wow. Nice man?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
He was. Yeah. I mean, he believed in me. I had another agent at the time because all of a sudden all these people were fighting over me, and that was weird. That was weird. I was with Ruth Birch as my manager at one point.
I don't know Ruth Birch.
Well, if you
Is that
look
a big
at
thing?
Lucy or the Dick Van Dyke Show, she managed a whole bunch of people. She was quite old at the time. But anyway, everybody started to fight over me, and that I already had signed with one agent, and that's when Chris swept in and saw me at the Hotel Roosevelt. He saw me, and he wanted
Up
me
on
to-
Hollywood Boulevard, Hotel Roosevelt,
Yep.
where the very first Oscars were ever held.
Correct. Yeah.
That's about the time I came in and said, I'm the guy with the muckalucks, remember me?
Did you put a ring on it at that point, John?
And you missed the Muckalucks?
Oh, wow.
Please?
Yep. Yeah, 8 hours mixing
Those
and
are
matching.
pretty heady times, I must
Mixing
say.
and matching.
Tell the story of when you found out you got cast.
Yes.
That's a good story.
2 of my Minneapolis friends, guy I'd done stand-up with in Minneapolis, a guy named Jeff Gerbino, and another friend of mine, also from Minneapolis, we decided to go in the middle of the day to see the Blues Brothers. I came out of there and called my agent. I'd gotten a text or something and heard that I'd been cast after I'd been to the Blues Brothers.
Oh, there you go. And for the audience, John, will you explain the Blues Brothers? A movie starring...
Yeah, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. Didn't you have to, call from a phone booth? Does anybody
absolutely.
know what a phone
Yeah,
booth
we had
is?
pagers. We had pagers.
I think I paged you because they called the house looking for you, and I paged you saying your agent's looking for you, and then you called your agent.
I don't really know how soon I left. Fairly quickly, I
Pretty
guess.
quickly,
Yeah. I was like, yeah. Well,
See ya.
see ya, you and those mucklucks.
Like what? But the
yeah.
Muckalucks. We did sort of take a break from each other when she went to New York because I thought this is just going to be a crazy experience, and you can't be
Tethered.
tethered to some dude across the country who wants to be a writer and has muckalucks in his closet, and you might meet somebody cool.
But you came a couple times.
But isn't it also you're giving your partner that you love and respect time to be in a world that was just going to be crazy?
And that job was
Yeah.
insane, and Gail would call me from time to time and say, you have to come to New York. I need to see you. And I would go to New York
Yes.
for a few days and
course.
just be with her.
I cannot imagine Saturday Night Live, the pressure.
Yeah,
It
extraordinary.
was very strange to turn on the television on Saturday night and see Gail being on
my face was the first
TV.
face. I was in season 6 after all the original people had left. So the Prince of Then was throwing us all out there and go for it. So the first image of that 6th season was my face in bed with Elliot Gould. And all of us, we were all in bed, literally, with Elliot Gould. But my face was the first thing that came up.
But you have
My
have to understand the cultural
significance.
of that show at the time.
Yes.
Those people were so famous. Original
The
group.
James,
And so
the
when
Aykroyd, Belushi.
I mean, we think about TV shows now, they go on their run. These days, it's a 3-year run, but in those days, it was, 5 years. The show lasts 5 years, and then it's over, and you move on to the next show. Nobody ever thought about, well, just put a whole new cast in there and just keep the show going.
Right.
And here they are. How many years have they been doing this now?
Approaching 50
So she comes in with this group, and they were so
Merciless?
nervous about it, they decided to promote it like this. Gail Matthius, the new Gilda Radner.
Oh, boy.
Denny Dillon, the new so-and-so. Charlie Rocket, the new Chevy Chase.
They're trying to bookend us, what do you call it? Pigeonhole.
Yeah, it was
bird.
Yeah,
it was pretty weird.
They were trying to find some kind of connecting tissue.
Yeah.
And that the show never, ever does that.
No.
And now that you look back on it 40 years, they got new energy in there.
Yep.
And this person's really funny and they do this, and that's what you hear people talk about.
We watch the show religiously.
Absolutely.
It's still funny. The kids on it today are...
These kids today.
They're really good. They're
They are
talented people.
Yeah, and I so appreciate, I know what's going on backstage and changing clothes.
The grind of doing the show more than you've been up against.
What did I know? I'd been in LA for a year.
Yeah, but you were doing shows at night and you were doing this and that and you're going from one place to another constantly. But was this worse, let's say? Was it harder? Was it crazy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because not only was I trying to bring my characters from my stand-up act into, because that's what I was comfortable with. I had these characters, and I said, we got to write these sketches around. But I had to sell. I had to go into the rooms with the writers that I started to feel like I was clicking with and go, can we kick this idea around with my character?
Which writers?
Mel Green and Billy Brown. They were part of Tommy Tofu from the Comedy Store. So, yeah, really intense environment, but I just thought it was normal because I had, work-wise, I had no other jobs to compare it to. I just was thrown into this thing, and I had to figure it out.
Such an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It's going back to the dark ages, but television was 3 channels.
Right.
ABC, CBS, and NBC.
Yeah.
That was it. That's the only way you could get entertainment.
Yes.
There was PBS around somewhere, but
that would be a mistake to hit that channel.
yeah. And so what I noticed as a concerned onlooker, because I was like, what's that movie about the background singers who are like 40 steps from
40 feet from fame,
40
or
feet
3
from fame or
feet from
something.
fame.
Yeah,
2
that
feet
that
from
was
fame.
me. So I was, walking around
Adjacent.
I was walking around with the muckalucks, and I know I've overplayed that gag, but sometimes you bring things back and it works.
Of course, you shine them up, especially at that time in your life.
But what I will say is the fame was instantaneous and intense. One day we were just John and Gail bopping around, the world. And then the next day it was Gail Matthius and that other guy. But it was really, really intense. And people would call out her name. And
I would turn around going, oh.
People would
that's
charge
right. Oh.
her to get and have all these pictures and with her arm around them to sign them. And then,
wild.
And then there was some really dangerous, icky mail.
Then she had some stalkers, and it was all really kind of crazy. And then on the flip side, when she left that show, the fame kind of disappeared.
Oh, it just evaporated.
As instantaneously as it had appeared, which was very weird.
Was that more welcome than not? Or
Pretty,
what?
it was
Or
to me,
or
but
did it psychologically
it was devastating.
Yeah, okay.
It was kind of devastating. Not to lose that attention, but to have lived that crazy high for a lot of that year, and then a new producer came in and didn't hire me back. It was devastating.
Yeah.
It was devastating.
The pieces that I've read, you were a standout of the season.
Yeah,
actually.
and that was an awkward position because everybody else was getting blasted. And poor Gilbert Gottfried, may he rest in peace also. Yikes. He was on my series that year. So I had very good reviews. I felt very good. But I felt like I had to be modest and careful and didn't want to be... And you're lucky me.
You had 2 things. You're a woman and Midwestern.
Yes.
So politeness was
Yep.
at the top of your
Be nice. Be
duties.
nice. Don't Don't get too big for your britches.
It's wonderful to look back at that group. Eddie came in.
He was B team.
He was B team. They have that now. Like they have a huge cast now, but they're the
Supporting
regular
cast
players,
or
and then
the-
there's all the other people.
Yeah.
And Eddie was one of those guys for about 3 minutes, and then
And Eddie, you mean?
Eddie Murphy, and then everybody realized, oh, he's Eddie Murphy, and he's singular. And then he sort of took over. But it was Gail, Eddie, Denny Dillon, Gilbert Gottfried, Charlie Rocket,
And Risley.
And when we look back at it now from this perspective, 40-some years later, you know, Charlie is gone, Gilbert is gone. It's sobering. And I, again, as a concerned onlooker, I would fly into New York. I would go to the show, super thrilling, see her on stage doing Saturday Night Live. I mean, for us in Minnesota, when that show came on, we would go home. Again, no DVRs, no way to record this stuff. You would be at home on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock to watch that show.
That was the thing.
That was the thing. And it was such a cultural phenomenon. Water cooler, everybody talking about those sketches, you know, Todd. So there I was, you know, a few short years later, sitting in the audience watching my girlfriend on stage on this show, sitting next to O.J. Simpson or Chevy Chase or Prince. You know, the part about it that was so kind of thrilling was the ringleader then was Charlie Rocket. And Charlie, I don't know if you know who Charlie is.
Yes.
He was probably about 6'3", 6'4", very lean, really handsome, really funny, very charismatic and kind. He would say, "We're going to Chinatown for Peking duck." And then this whole troupe of Saturday Night Live actors would traipse out into Chinatown, and we'd just go in, and I'm just kind of hanging out going, this is amazing. And we'd
So
get in
cool.
there and we'd eat. And if this is after the show, so it was already like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're in our 20s and nobody's tired, and you're just going.
It's so interesting to hear about this. I mean, because he has his recollection. It's sort of from his point of view and stuff. I go, I have no recollection of Peking duck.
Yeah. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I think you and I were working together when Charlie died by suicide.
Yes, we were.
I just remember how upset you were.
Reed Steiner told me about it. He called me and asked me if I'd heard it. It was around 2006 or 7, I think. In any case, Reed called me and said, "Have you heard this?" And I said, "No." And I hung up the phone and I called Charlie and I got his voicemail. I said, "Hey, Charlie, I just heard this crazy rumor. Give me a call. This is insane. Let me know this is not true." And it was. Yeah, that's all a long time ago. It was really thrilling for Gail. And by the way, it's not like nobody's ever seen or heard of Gail in the years since. She came back here. He went on a show called Assaulted Nuts that was shot in London.
Yeah,
and,
at L Street or Pinewood or
yeah,
L
and it
Street
was
Studios.
Gail and Emma Thompson and Wayne Knight were
Amazing.
in that cast.
and Bill Sadler.
That's around the time that I got on Remington Steele. She was on Assaulted Nuts. She was in London. I was in L.A.
That
and
was
she
fun.
would call me and say, "Let's meet in New York for a weekend."
Oh my gosh,
And
I
so
love
she
that.
would fly to New York.
Love
Gail was
that.
usually there before me. She would have checked into some fancy hotel, and we would meet in the hotel and go out to dinner and run around the city for 2 days and then go our separate ways. And I remember thinking, we're like some cool, young, hip Hollywood dudes. Like, this is how what kind of life are we living right now? That
But
was pretty
wait,
fun.
were we married? We were married.
We
by then. Yes, we were married by
We're
then.
married because we were married when I went on
Yes.
Remington.
So I had to have it.
But what I wanted to say about that was, and by the way, Gail has stacks of letters from Emma Thompson that she kept that are in her memory boxes that from time to time we see when we're purging. She was a prolific letter writer, and they were in close contact for many years after that show, and she was always writing, and how do I keep a man, Gail? You know, that sort of stuff.
No, that was on the telephone one time. She called from the Beverly Hills Hotel. She was married to Brannick at the time. She said to me,
Gail, I know you've been married for a while. How do you do it?
and then go to lunch.
So she did that show. Then she was on a show called
Laugh Tracks
with Howie Mandel and
Jim Stahl, Jim Fisher,
Lucy Webb,
Frank Welker.
And that show was like 5 seasons. And then
I want to have a family and a voiceover career.
Yeah, can't really run around town doing all these auditions. So she had this massive voiceover career.
Cartoon career.
I remember at one point in time, she had 9 TV series at one time.
Wow.
So she had a big career.
John.
Yeah. Let's talk about me.
Yes. If I recall correctly, you wrote a spec Remington Steele.
Correct.
And you sent it to the producers of Remington Steele. And one of the number one rules in show business is you never write a spec of the show and send it to the show, because the show could then be liable for, you could then say, oh, you stole my idea. I sent my script to you. How the heck did you pull that off?
Well, some of what you said is accurate. Okay. So I've been scrambling around. It took me 5 years to get a job as a writer in Hollywood when I started.
Who supported you during that time? Do you recall?
My father sent me money every month.
Were you still living in Pico and Robertson?
Yeah, we were still living in Pico and Robertson. And at a certain point, Gail was working a lot and making a living, and I was still doing the sort of temporary job thing.
You worked for Arco.
I worked for Arco. And I'd be going to do these, the oil company.
Okay.
So I'd go in to do these temporary office jobs, and everybody kept offering me jobs. You know, like, why are you a temporary worker? Come and work here. And I kept turning them down to write scripts. And by the way, I wrote 25 spec scripts before I wrote that Remington Steele script. Wow. And I finally said to Gail, I'm making $300 a week, and you're making a lot of money for us at the time.
Right.
And I just need some help, man. I mean, I'm working 40 hours a week. And if I could just apply that 40 hours a week to writing scripts, I could maybe make this go faster, because I'm ready to throw in the towel and FO out of here, because this is too hard.
Yeah, but I believed in you. I said, it's going to work out. It's going to happen. I'll just keep doing my thing here. We'll just keep working hard, and it's going to happen for you. And I was right.
You were right.
He said, okay, just right. And so then I was scrambling around and meeting people, as you do when you're a young person in Hollywood. And I met this guy named Gary Randall, who's had a really nice career himself as a producer, and he's a director. And I think he's probably in the Writers Guild too. He's probably in SAG. I mean, Gary does it all. He's a bigger-than-life, old-fashioned Hollywood character. Love him dearly. He called me up one day and he said, what are you doing tonight? I said, and this was Gary, because he would get me into a lot of crazy things like, we're going to Vegas. We're going to, So he goes, we're going to a Dodger game. I said, okay. And he said, bring your script. I said, what script? He goes, bring your Remington script. I said, to the Dodger game? He said,
just in case there's a foul ball.
Yeah. He goes, bring your script, because I've also invited a guy named John Scheinfeld, who is in charge of, he's a junior executive in charge of development at MTM. I said, all right. So go to the game. Scheinfeld is there. We meet. I give him my script. He goes away. He calls me like a week later, and he said, hey, I read your script. I think it's really good. I have some thoughts. Would you be willing to do a revision on it? Because I know things about the show that you don't know. I think I'd like to give it to the exec producer if you are open to doing these revisions. I said, I'll come over to your house right now and I'll start typing. He sent the script to Michael Gleason, who had created the show and was the showrunner. They were in their second season. I had written 3 scripts. I had written the Remington. I wrote an episode of Family Ties, which was a Michael J. Fox sitcom at the time. And I wrote a feature film. And I thought, okay, this is my last shot. I am out of here if none of this works. I had gotten a call from this producer named Lloyd Garver, who was on the Family Ties show. And he had read my spec. And he called me up and he said, hey, it's Lloyd Garver from Family Ties. And I'm like, You know, like
I cannot speak.
I got a ball of hair in my mouth. He goes, hey, I read your spec script. I really loved it. And he goes, we're going on hiatus, but when we start up again, I'd like you to come in and pitch. And I was like, amazing. Okay, I'm there. Then about a week later, I get a call from Jan St. Amant, who was Michael Gleason's assistant. And she said, Mother Jan, and she said, I'm calling from Michael Gleason's office, the executive producer of Remington Steele. Are you available to come in for a meeting? I was like,
it's boring.
Pretty sure I am. Yeah. So I go over there to meet with Michael, and I'm completely intimidated. I'm totally shaking. And the only thing on his desk is my script. Like his desk was completely clean, just my script. So I go in, I sit down, and he says, I read your script. I love it. I want to buy it. I was like, huh? He goes, yeah, I want to buy it, and we're going to make it, but I need you to make some changes. I'm like, whatever you need, boss.
Can do.
I'm going to do it. So he gives me a bunch of notes. I leave. I do the revision. I send it in. Crickets for 3 weeks.
Yikes.
I really thought I had boned it. I really did. Then the phone rings. It's Jan. And she goes, Michael wants to know if you can come in for a meeting. I said,
Another meeting?
okay. So I go over there.
Okay.
I drive over Laurel Canyon. And I go to MTM Studios, which is now the CBS studio center. Radford.
In the Valley.
I sit down, and he's very casual, and he goes, so what's going on in your life right now? And I said...
Confusion and nerves.
It's confusion and nerves was my first thought. And my second thought was, well, I have a mini-series in development at Paramount. And
a tennis game later.
Michael looks at me and he goes, babe, you got nothing going on. I said, you're right. And he goes, how would you like to be a staff writer on Remington Steele? I was like,
The dream.
you've got to be kidding me. And he goes, no. I said, when does the job start? He said, how's tomorrow? That was the beginning. And that was in 1984.
That's it for episode 1. Join us next week for part 2.
That's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and thrive. Till we get to hang out again, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards. Executive producer, Kristen O'Verne. Producers, Terry Sampson and Sandy Adamitis. Music by Ethan Stoller.